So now I'm very excited to welcome Ann Harding Woodworth. Ann is the author of 7 books of poetry and 4 chapbooks. Her most recent book, Trouble, includes her persona cycle, Hannah Alive, which she transformed into a one-woman play in verse. The drama was a finalist at the Adirondack Shakespeare Co Festival, where it had a reading in 2016. The poem Looking Homeward was selected by Terence Winch as his pick of the week for Best American Poetry's blog in January of this year. An excerpt from Ann's chapbook, The Last Gun, won the COG Poetry Award and was subsequently animated. Ann is also a member with me of the Folger Poetry Board and serves on the Board of Governors of the Emily Dickinson Museum. Please welcome Ann Harding Woodworth. Oh, and please, if you have questions for her, put them in the chat and I'll be able to read those questions to her at the end of the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorrit. This is so nice. I'm so grateful to you and the Arts Club, and another thing I'm grateful to is Zoom. Zoom during this pandemic, this year that we've just been through, has been a real friend to poetry. Every Friday morning I've gone to Ireland to meet with a poetry group in County Clare. I've gone to California on Zoom, to Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Massachusetts. I've gone a lot of places on Zoom, and I never could have done that. Obviously we couldn't travel. Not to mention, of course, how Zoom has kept me in touch with my sons and their families, and I've met my 4 siblings once a month. Zoom has been a lifeline for me. Now, I know there have been funerals on Zoom. There have probably been baptisms and brisses, weddings, of course, and on that subject, I want to say that the Arts Club is a lovely place for a wedding. My stepson and his beautiful wife were married at the Arts Club in September of 1995. But back to Zoom. Recently, the Washington Post had a story about Israelis marrying on a Zoom portal in, of all places, Utah. Now, it's not clear whether those marriages are going to count, but they did do it. On the subject of weddings and technology, though, I'd like to read a poem which harkens back to a time long before Zoom ever came into being. This is based on a write-up I read of the marriage of Harry Rance and Nellie Maxwell. This poem is from my book, The Eyes Have It. This is called Wedding in an Age of Telephony, 1899. Harry in Elmira, New York, with the clergyman, Nellie in Williamsport, PA, with the bridesmaids. Where does touch meet? State lines, invisible, are there to be crossed. But what about the kiss? This is ahead of death, till death do them part. Harry and Nellie, and they laughed hilariously, what with this electric way of communicating love and intentions through an instrument to be held to a mouth and ear. A lawyer told them it was legal, as if the law has anything to do with a vow. I do, I do. Meanwhile, you and I look at each other on little screens. We work our thumbs, oblivious to touch, day after day. And tongue, flesh, fluids, scent, heat. Blue light solicits in our numbered sleep and keeps us from the dream. Harry didn't see Nellie in her white satin gown as she spoke to him from the phone office. Bridesmaids giggly for good reason as she put a ring on her own finger. Well, I think Harry and Nellie probably had a pretty good marriage. They seem to have the sense of fun that's necessary. As long as we're on the subject of weddings, let's go to the late 50s, early 60s, when there was a lot of alcohol, a lot of cigarettes, And here's a poem about a typical wedding in 1959. It's a shotgun wedding, which was pretty common in those years, and which was particularly hard on the parents. This is Groom Goes Missing at Rehearsal Dinner. Groom goes missing at rehearsal dinner. Mother of the groom, her hands shaking as she holds a cigarette in one, a Manhattan in the other, in her house filled with friends, strangers, and their smoke. The ashtrays need emptying. Sip. Where's the groom? Where's my son? She calls out to no one in particular. Where the hell's the best man? The groom is nowhere to be seen. The best man is sitting in a lazy boy with a tall glass of something. Sip. Best man, she says, knowing full well his name and his history. Be a lamb and empty the ashtrays, will you? Sip, sip, sip. And the mother of the groom, her cheeks flushed, smoke coming out of her nose as if she were a cornered bull. Sip. Looks around in her solitude at the crowd in her house with their Kents, parliaments, viceroys, and cools. She takes a long swig of her Manhattan as the best man performs his duty for his friend the groom, who isn't there, but whose mother is hoping something good will rise up out of the ashes. Well, enough of weddings. Let's go to my new book, Trouble. Here it is with a nice sketch by Harvey Mudd. This book looks at all kinds of trouble, psychological, physical, parental, medical, mental, you name it, and the trouble is in here. I'm going to read from a cycle of poems in the voice of Hannah Hyatt O'Reilly, which Dorrit mentioned in the introduction. Hannah is going on 80. She's a widow. Tony had died some years ago. She's a sculptor of small human figures. She lives alone with her dog Max in an apartment. She has 2 sons who she fears will put her in a nursing home, and so she thinks about how she might do herself in before that happens. She goes through various scenarios of dying by electricity, pills, alcohol, and drowning. Water, she says, has always soothed me. So I thought I'd read just a little bit about her thoughts on drowning. I'm going to start in the middle of stanza 15. A few of my friends have fallen in love again and married or moved in with some needy type. They've put off thinking about end of life. That conversation doesn't fit in when you've rediscovered a certain friskiness in yourself. Me, I swim, and I take Max for walks. And now we will do number 24. There's a song I know. The words go something like this. È giunta mezzanotte, si spengono I rumori, si spegne anche l'insegna di quell'ultimo caffè. A Parisian in tails, late at night, walks along the Seine. It could have been Rome, but it wasn't. The words are Italian, but the scene is Paris. And by the last verse, the man's hat is floating on the river. So is the gardenia that was in his lapel. He's gone. That's why I sing only the first verse. Till now, that is. I thought it was better to stay with the first verse of tragedy than to get to the end. But now I wonder, was it really tragic? Maybe he was just an old Parisian, an old person like me. He dressed for the occasion, knew what he was going to do. 25. There's a bridge not too far from here. It's a big old steel construction with struts and trusses, rivets and girders. I don't know if I'd be able to climb the railing. Boats go back and forth beneath it, not big ones, but it's a busy river. Tony had a friend whose father had made some terrible error at work, cost the company millions, and so he jumped from a bridge into a New York City river. Don't know which one, but it seems he couldn't do anything right. He landed on a sailor in a scow and killed the poor guy. How can we ever be certain of not hurting another person? 26. Recently, in the outdoor city pool, I tried to suck water into my body, through my nose and into my lungs. I didn't put rocks down my bathing suit or do anything Virginia Woolf-like. No real drama, just practice, though there was something familiar about it. Water to water, beginning and end, full circle, a palindrome like my name, Hannah. Hannah Hyatt O'Reilly, H2O. Well, a sniff is all it took, and I felt the liquid enter my nose, causing me to almost smell something under my brow, or was it pain? I coughed chlorine, my sounds shot up, staccato, pizzicato, with splash and panic. My arms flailed and I swam over poolside where a skimmer bobbed, sucking up the litter of a city's summer. A lifeguard from her tall chair looked down at me and called out. I couldn't hear what she said, though by then I'd stopped sputtering, having learned what desperation mixed with instinct underwater would make me do. Thrust myself up from the deep, the way a newborn pushes out from its mother in an urgency of abandoning water for oxygen. I'm not trying to be born. So that's Hannah, a little bit of her. I've gotten to know her pretty well. I talk to her sometimes. All right, let's switch gears now and go back to the 60s in two different centuries. Friend and poet Nan Meneely and I are going to read a new poem of mine called Parallel Rides. In this poem, I have dovetailed two letters, each written the day after the assassination of a US president. One, the letter of Nettie Bacon, an Ohio girl, senior at Mount Holyoke Seminary, which became Mount Holyoke College. This is in April of 1865, on her way back to school in a public carriage from Williamsburg, Mass., which is a section of Springfield, Massachusetts. The other letter by a girl named Anne, who was a junior at Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts, near Mount Holyoke, in 1963, having gone to New York City and back again in one day. Nan Meneely is the author of two absolutely wonderful books of poetry, Letter from Italy and Simple Absence. She's going to read the part of Nettie Bacon. Is Nan ready?
Ready.
Good. I can't see everybody. Okay. Parallel Rides.
Saturday, April 15th, 1865. Dearest friends at home, today has been, I believe, the saddest day this nation ever saw. I've seen many strong men weep like children over the untimely death of our dear president. I was returning from Williamsburg this morning in the hack when we received the startling announcement that the president was assassinated.
Saturday, November 23rd, 1963. Dear Mom, I got a ride with Cheska to New York yesterday afternoon. Stopped in New Haven to pick up Jimmy. At a red light, someone yelled, "The president is dead."
At first, a faint hope that it might be a mistake flitted across our minds.
We thought the guy must mean the president of Yale.
But soon, the painful fact that it was official was made known to us.
Thursday had been such a happy day for me. For you too, I suppose. Didn't you go to symphony? I got an A on a paper, an unusual occurrence. And I was looking forward to the weekend in New York City, happy to catch a ride with Cheska and Jimmy.
Friday was a great day of rejoicing here, and I suppose it was with you. Flags were raised, salutes fired, bells rang out merrily, speeches made. Indeed, all were jubilant over the good news about the end of the war, so lately received. We were expressing our regrets and lamenting over the sad news in the stage when I saw one of the ladies who sat on the back seat laughing and tickling herself over our calamity. I know she was just as glad as she could be that Lincoln was dead. She did not say a word. She knew it was not safe for her. I do believe we should have had a pitched battle if she had opened her mouth.
When we got to New York, Cheska and Jimmy dropped me off at St. Patrick's. I was beside myself with sorrow. Someone was playing the national anthem on that great organ, and I started crying and decided then and there to go back to Northampton. I overheard someone say that there were people celebrating in Texas. I cried all the way back on the bus, did nothing to hide my tears or my sobs.
When we arrived into Northampton, we found the stores closed and flags hung at half-mast, bells tolling.
Flags at half-mast in Northampton made me cry even more. I went straight to the dorm and collapsed in bed without even changing into my nightgown.
How differently morning was ushered in. Bells tolled long and mournfully. The faces which wore such a hopeful and cheerful look are today flooded with tears.
Tears are all I have today. It's Saturday, and the country has been left without our Kennedy. My heart is broken.
Be good. Be good. Your affectionate Nettie.
I can't wait to get home for Thanksgiving. Anne. So, just as a little aside, 1 month before Kennedy's assassination on October 26th of 63, he dedicated the library at Amherst College to Robert Frost, the Robert Frost Library, just a few miles from Smith and Mount Holyoke. I'd like to read just a few lines from that speech. Robert Frost saw poetry as the means of saving power from itself. When power leads man towards arrogance, poetry reminds him of his limitations. When power narrows the areas of man's concern, poetry reminds him of the richness and diversity of his existence. When power corrupts, poetry cleanses. Well, soccer has played a big role in my life. Both my boys played professional soccer, and one of them, after the World Cup in '94, ended up in Padua, Italy, the first American to play in the first division of Italy, which they call Serie A. Consequently, I've written a lot of soccer poems. We visited my son in Padua, staying in a hotel which we hadn't known when we booked it, but it turned out to be a spa where I learned I could get wrapped in mud. This area of northern Italy was popular for its mud in Roman times. In 1997, we got a water bill with a message on it that became the epigraph of my poem. This is called Soccer Fields Near Padua. The epigraph is, did you know There's as much water in the world today as there was thousands of years ago. Actually, it's the same water. The water from your faucet could contain molecules that dinosaurs drank. Perhaps Columbus sailed across it. Soccer fields near Padua. Near Padua, the oval fields stretch wetly green and mown. And at the museum, a Greek heads the ball on a terracotta plate. And Romans, it is written, played the game to prepare for battle. Athlete statues glide in grace out of into other fluid days. Near Padua, mud of ages slides in streams and rivers, chalk mud, sweet fern and fossil mud, bark and spore mud, mud of mystery cures to soothe the joints of ancient ones, and me. Wrapped in mud, I'm damp with one of them right now, Centurion, I think, whose bones rest somewhere in this hot and creamy salve. Near Padua, mud's made whole and warm again by rains and thermal streams, by Isabella's oceans, by Kalamata's sun that heals and dries the fields near Padua and keeps the quicklime crisp. So you might think that soccer and poetry don't really go together. It's sort of almost like an oxymoron, but that's not the case at all. I've been involved in an after-school program for kids here in DC who alternate between playing soccer after school and writing poetry and performing poetry. They're in slams and they write the most wonderful stuff. Check it out, dcscores.org. When my husband and I travel around, signs often catch my attention, especially in England. They have really great signs in England. And I use those signs for the titles of poems. Here's one of my signs. One of my signed poems based on a sign we saw in a former World War II base in England that is now just a group of abandoned buildings. Sign, fragile roof. At times your feet feel securely planted on the stairs. Not so much perhaps on your way from the basement, but beginning with the first floor where food is stirred, pureed, and brought to a boil. There your feet handle well the risers. Hungry, you arrive at the floor where you sit at table, and then you go on up to where living's done on sofas, and where fires heat and light the walls, and ever moving up, with confidence you reach the floor for sleeping and making love, unless you were so moved before on earlier floors, since both can be had in any room of any house. Up, and now you limp until you reach whole lath and shingles, fallen in among the unused chairs, the broken hobby horses, tax returns and diaries in boxes, trunks, valises, and there the summer clothes, as if the season will return. Through decay and openings in the fragile roof, you look into the leafless trees outside and into clouds gray and full of snow, doubtful you should venture onto any roof that has opened its maw to lure you, suck you back into something less than paradise. And I'd like to finish with another signed poem that fits the times we're in right now, especially during the pandemic when we're so aware of economic divisions in our country. There are 11 million children living in poverty. This poem was recognized on World Food Day in 2019 by the UN Food and Agriculture Organization and Poetry X Hunger. If you have a poem about hunger or want to read poems about hunger, by all means, look at Hiram LaRue's website, Poetry X Hunger. The sign this poem is based on was a typical English, it was typical English humor. I used it for the epigraph of the poem and called the poem Overabundance. Remembering the woman who said, "I've been on a few diets because I can't get enough to eat on just one." They can't stop themselves. Daily they take twice as much as what will do them, and they go global. India, Italy, China, Greece, Uganda, France, and myriad other cuisines. Burmese villagers asked them, "What do you eat that's made you so big?" It was never rice and a few leaves. No, not for them. They don't remember subsistence. They need more than twice as much, thrice maybe, and they talk of food as if it's a designer dress, a private jet. Food is a swimming pool. Food is a country club, a diamond ring, sparkly humor, laughter at all the wrong things. Food is arranged, photographed, the image shared with the famished world. They can't stop themselves. And that's it. Thank you all for being here tonight. If anybody's interested in buying my book, I know some of you have it. The websites where you can do so is in the chat. Anyway, stay well and happy. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, Anne, and thank you for everyone who's here. Please do put questions into the chat and I will try to read them off. I was just going to throw my own question out there to start the discussion, which was, I noticed a line that Hannah says, which was, if you don't have religion, there's always that gnat in the back of your mind. And I was wondering, what was the gnat in the back of your mind that caused you to write a book called Trouble?
Well, yeah, Hannah has a lot of trouble. The gnat, well, of course, you know, with religion, I mean, if you don't have religion, and she didn't, you know, there's that doubt that that maybe you're making a mistake and it's going to come back to haunt you. But she fit right into the whole trouble, psychological trouble, perhaps, that I thought this book should have.
And I guess another question that I have that leads from that is, I started tagging books where someone expressed either a problem with their mental health or a deep unhappiness. And I found there was a tie between tags, numbers of poems about that, and numbers of poems about injustice. And I wondered if they're next to each other for a reason, or if you wanted to say anything about the fact that those are two such substantial parts of the book.
Well, when there's injustice, there's definitely trouble for anybody involved, whether it's the person perpetrating injustice or the person on the receiving end of injustice. So that would be a reason for why it went into the book. Primarily, I started looking primarily in that first section after Hannah called Split. And that has a lot of poems, quite a few poems about people with just with some mental troubles.
And I'm now trying.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm now trying to pull questions off the chat, and I'm slow, so I apologize to the people. Okay. But the first one was about the source of the two letters in the assassination poem.
Yeah. The first letter, the letter from 1865, is a letter that a woman up in Maine she was an Emily Dickinson scholar, and she happened to find that letter written by a student at Mount Holyoke at an antique shop. Now, this woman was she made miniature books. and I collect miniature books. And she took this letter, typeset it, and put it into a book about, I should have brought it here to show you tonight, but it's only about 2 inches, 1 inch by 2 inches. And she put the letter, it's in a little book, and then she put it into an envelope so it looked like a letter. And I bought that from her. And not too long ago, I took it out, and I just thought, my gosh, this girl was driving home to back to Mount Holyoke on the day after Lincoln was shot, and this Anne that I mentioned, was a junior at Smith and drove down to New York with my roommate Cheska and her eventual husband Jimmy. And I just couldn't take it, and I just got on a bus and went right back to Northampton. It was just too overwhelming an experience.
Yeah, that's an amazing.
That letter that I'm to my mother. It was to my mother. Yeah.
Thank you. Now there was another question about your process. Are you constantly jotting things down in a notebook? How do you write?
I don't write it. I do sometimes, the notes in an iPad. There's that thing called, I think it's called Notes, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I do jot things in there, and then I can just print them out quickly. So I have a paper copy of it, but I just keep my eyes open and my ears and listen to what people say and watch what they do. And I just love writing about people that I see that are interesting or did any of you see the movie, let me see, what was it? Murder Among the Mormons?
No.
And it's on Netflix now. It just came onto Netflix a couple of weeks ago, and it's just fascinating about this forger of documents. And he forged an Emily Dickinson poem. And so this morning I just kept doing lots of research on him, because that's the kind of person that really interests me. He unfortunately, his name was Mark Hoffman. He became a murderer, and he's now in prison for life. But he still was one of the best forgers, I guess, they've ever seen in the forging world.
Man. I guess I might throw one question in because there's such a variety of female voices in this book. And one of the poems that blew me away was, I guess, your mother coming downstairs with the veil on because her 10th anniversary had been forgotten. And it seems like a lot of women in the book feel overlooked.
Oh, well, yeah, I was going to read that tonight, and then I decided not to. But
do you want to? I love that poem.
Yeah, maybe I will. Let's see. Where is that poem?
I have it marked if you want the page.
Yeah.
115.
10th anniversary forgotten, 1946. 3 years after I was born, she was ready to give birth again. Time to forget the war, time to laugh, time to get on with the job of making babies and money. My father sat at the table with us 3 girls, waiting for her to descend. What could she be doing upstairs? Why wasn't she dishing out our dinner? Shh, quiet. She's coming down now. And that's when the bride appeared in a maternity dress and a yellowed tulle veil gathered over her hair by combs festooned with silk fertile orange blossoms. The groom, who had forgotten the day, had forgotten how to laugh, cried the most sudden tears I'd ever seen.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Let me see. I see people chatting.
I have a
Hi.
question.
Yeah. What's it say?
You're quite involved with Emily Dickinson. I'm wondering how, if in any way, she has affected the way you write poetry, or do you see her influence in your poetry?
Yeah. You know, I don't see her influence at all. And I feel as if she hasn't affected my writing at all. I did write a poem in her, that's going to be in an anthology of poets talking to poets. And I wrote a poem in her style, which was a lot of fun to do. I even, the dashes and all that. That was really fun to do. And the poem that the Forger wrote was just really an Emily Dickinson poem. Maybe not as good as what she would have done, and certainly mine wasn't as good as what she would have done. She's fantastic, and she is a person of today. She's just as modern today as, well, she was just before her time back in her day. But I don't think I have been in my regular poems like what I read tonight. I don't feel as if she has influenced me. But thanks for the question, Michael.
I'm seeing comments, but I'm not seeing further questions.
Hi, this is Sasha. There was one question I think that was interesting from Sarah. What is the title of the poem where Italy and France are both mentioned? I love the verses on the River Seine.
Right. The title of the poem or the song, I forget the name of the song. Maybe I wrote it in the poem is part of Hannah Alive. So that, and Hannah Alive is about 26 or 730 poems. But let me just see if I have anything about that in the title of that song. It's a very popular Italian song, but I don't think I have anything about that, no.
Is it in the notes?
No, the title of the song is not in the notes. It's I should have that in there. It's just a beautiful song, very popular from, I think, I don't know, the 1940s or so.
And then somebody asked, what was the title of the very first poem you read where the woman put her ring on her finger?
That is Telephony in 1899. Wedding by, let me check, got the right title of that. Here we go. That is Wedding in an Age of Telephony, 1899.
And that's in the other book, right?
That's in The Eyes Have It.
Okay.
Yes.
And so one more thing before we wrap it up, since we have an audience of 66 strong, for folks who are here, can you put where you're zooming in from on chat? It'll be kind of fun to see where people are coming in from. Are you in DC? Are you coming from another country, another city? Just to kind of get a sense of where everybody is. Oh, there we go.
Cool. And I also want to give Michael Whelan, who is the head of our literary committee, 2 seconds before you all scoot away.
Yes, I'd like to say hello and speaking to the literary committee, and I'm also on the board of the club. I would like to say that if you have never heard of the Arts Club before, you have now. If you've never visited the Arts Club, you have now. You're part of our community. We welcome you in. We have a very, very active world here, and we have a website that I think you're welcome to visit. We are also doing a series of, this is the picture of the club. It's a beautiful building. If you're in DC, you must come and visit once the pandemic hibernation is over, because we're eager to bring more people in again. But if you'd like to follow what's going on, once a week we have a blast which lists all our events, and they're not just poetry, but we have a lot of poetry and we have a lot of literature, but we have art shows, we have music, things like that. So please keep us in mind. And the website is, the website address is Washington Arts Club. Yes, that's right, .org. Okay, so please come and visit us. And You do not have to be a member to attend most of our Zooms, so you're most welcome.
And I will put that address in the chat so people can have access to it tonight. There you go.
And if you know of anyone who would like to have seen tonight's program and couldn't, this will be posted and they can watch it later.
And one other thing that I might add, if you go to our website, we have a link generally at the beginning where we now have a YouTube station, and you can go in, and previous poetry readings and other events we've had are available for you to look as well.
And I'll put that address in the chat as well.
Well, as I mentioned, our stepson, my stepson, and Rick Woodworth and his wife Stephanie were married at the Arts Club, and it was just an absolutely wonderful place for it. We have great pictures from that wedding. Lots of good memories.
And it's looking better even now. We've done a lot during the pandemic to fix it up, so it's
Hey, good.
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 Well, thank you, everyone, and I do hope you join us again. And thank you again, Anne.
Thank you, Dorrit. Thank you, and Sasha. Thank you so much. It's great to have a person running the thing like that. That was really, you did a great job.
Thank you. And I invite everybody to like turn your cameras on and wave goodbye.
Yeah.
So I like to get a good picture of everybody. I know it's a lot, but say goodbye. Thank you for coming. And as we like to say, guys, that is a wrap.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Anne. I really appreciate it.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.